Yeah, there's definitely confusion about the link. Use Laurie Widener's link from this afternoon. So we're up to 436, 437. It continues to climb. Okay to begin, or do you think there's still a bit of a log? Numbers continue to climb. We were up to 448, now we're down to 447. Okay, so if it's okay, we'll get started. Is that all right? Hi, Kim. Okay, we're up to 256 attendees, which is a pretty good number. It seems to cover all PVEA, and anybody who may be a part of our support staff, you can feel free to join tomorrow. I'm going to have a similar conversation tomorrow. So I want to be respectful of your time. So I'll get started if that's okay. Thank you, Adele. And you too. First of all, thanks for joining this, what I'm calling State of the Union conversation. And I appreciate those of you that sent some questions in advance. It was very helpful. I'm hoping to touch upon those questions as well as some of the other things that might be on your mind. And there's a couple ways you can let me know that today. You can send a chat, and I know that will distract me, so I apologize in advance for that. You can put something in the Q&A, and Laurie Widener is here, and she's going to monitor the chat. She's going to monitor the Q&A. She's going to text me if a question comes through that I haven't addressed. She's also going to create a Google Doc of the questions so that if I need to reference them at the end, I'm happy to do that and make sure that the questions you have are addressed. So let me begin by first, anybody who celebrated Mother's Day because you're a mom or you have a special mom in your life yesterday, I hope you had a really nice day. I know it was nice to see the sun because it's been a bit gray over the past couple of weeks, and today, no exception, but I hope you had a nice Mother's Day. I've put together a few slides, and really these are speaking points for me, and we'll give you a sense of some of the topics that I've focused in on. I want to talk a little bit about teaching and learning and what's happening on this virtual voyage, as we call it. What does the end of the year look like? And we're slowly teasing that out. What does the startup to next year look like? We have some ideas. I'd like to share them with you. let's talk about the budget and then capital projects. And if there are other topics, as I said, you can click on the hand on your screen and Karthik Ganesh will let you unmute your mic and you can verbally express your question or submit it via chat or Q&A. And really the first thing I want to do is thank you for all that you're doing right now. Your efforts to interact, to engage, to help our kids learn are very much appreciated. I have described what's occurred as really turning education upside down in a day where we were forced to respond and support our students in ways that were completely new in many respects. But I really appreciate some of the creativity that I've heard about and some of the activities that you're offering our students. Some of the ways that you're interacting to support new learning are really impressive. And I appreciate your efforts. I appreciate those of you who have demonstrated a willingness to learn more and participate in some of the professional learning opportunities. They've been fantastic, and the feedback I'm receiving is that they've been really well received and supportive of your efforts. So I really appreciate that. For those of you that have helped out with the technology grab and goes or even the food distributions, thank you for that too. I know that right now there's a lot of uncertainty about being out there in the community and exposing yourself to other people, wearing a mask, socially distanced from others. So I really appreciate those of you that have come out and supported what may be happening at the building level to in turn support your students. So thanks for that, really. I hear lots of positive feedback about what's going on, and I hope that you're going to help me to understand from your perspective how you view this experience, because the reality is we could be starting the school year up this way, but we'll get there in a few minutes. So we administered a survey recently to parents, and I haven't been in there since we hit 1,000, but we've had a good response rate from the parents that chose to respond. And I'll share the results with you a little bit more as we continue to gather. I don't think it's been open a week yet. We're going to create a word cloud of those 3 words that we ask parents to use or to cite that describes the virtual voyage in their opinion for their child. You know, there was a lot of people that responded feeling like the amount of work was just right for their child. And people were divided on the synchronous and asynchronous. And you know that I have encouraged our staff to reach out and interact in some way with our students. I didn't want them to feel as if they were working independently for the rest of the year. Once we got this thing going, we got this voyage moving, and we shifted from enhancements to new learning. I recognize the challenges to that because we ourselves may have families, family members we're caring for, school that we're leading with our own children, and now we're tasked with also preparing lessons and engaging students at PV in new learning. So I recognize the challenges there. My encouragement has been for you to reach out and interact, as I've described it, with students to the degree that you're able and in the ways that you know support their learning. And for some of you, I know you've made video recordings, you post audio recordings. A lot of you refer our students to other videos, maybe on YouTube or Khan Academy or wherever they may be. And many of you engage kids in video conferencing, you communicate via email. And I think these things have been really helpful. I know that I've heard from students, the live interaction has been really special and something that's supported their social and emotional being. I know that can be challenging. However, right now, it seems as if I'm hearing more and more of people struggling, students struggling, and I'm guessing some adults too. This has gone on a long time, this stay-at-home order that's now been extended to June 4th. But I appreciate very much the interactions and the efforts you're making to interact with our students. So it was interesting reading some of the feedback about synchronous and asynchronous. I think synchronous is helpful in that it just offers an explanation and a little give and take conversation for students as they're attempting to realize new learning. And that was really the highest ranked item when parents were asked, what would help you the most in supporting your child's new learning? It was the teacher interaction. So it's a testament to how important all of you are in our students' learning. And that's not something we didn't know. it's something that's being realized in this environment a little bit differently, I think, than maybe what we expected. But it is a testament, and it's really an indication of how significant you are in helping our kids move forward. So I really appreciate all that you're doing, and have been so impressed by the creativity. So we're rapidly approaching the middle of May. I'm finding that hard to believe. I don't know if you are, but we'll hit May 15th this week. And with that really comes the beginning of the end of the school year. So our students' last day is June 8th. So those half days are now 4, 5, and 8. June 4th, June 5th, June 8th. So they'll finish on a Monday. Now, let's back up from that last day of school for students. Those are 3 half days, as they always are, and we can talk a little bit about what might happen from your perspective and for our students on those days. I know that typically we're doing some fun things outside or in our classrooms, and that's going to look different for certain. But that week prior, so I'm referring to the week of June 1st, June 2nd is the primary election, and 6 of our 7 buildings will now be utilized to host the primary, to serve as polling sites and host the primary election. And that looks different from in the past. We used to just have our 4 elementary schools. So June 2nd, while it's not technically a day off for us anymore, it was an in-service day, we shifted that to the very end of the year for teachers. It is a day where we can't access our buildings. And we're starting to think about that end of year schedule. When we can get into our buildings, we can allow our students into our buildings to retrieve their personal items. So we're starting to develop a schedule around that. The governor's extension to the stay-at-home order really is throwing a bit of a wrench in the system for me. So we have to talk about that. I have a meeting tomorrow to discuss some of the do's and don'ts around that. If we practice social distancing and we have the appropriate PPE, I'm not certain whether or not we can bring people into our buildings, but we're going to find that out and we're going to let you know. At any rate, overarching big picture is we want to give you some time at the end of the year to clean out your classrooms and to organize your things. And at the elementary level, to maybe help our students realize what they need to take home, what needs to stay with us. At the middle level, it's very similar. And we're going to have some of our staff, administrative staff, custodial staff help us clean out desks, clean out lockers. And then right now we're thinking about a potential grab and go for students, where on the 5th of June and the 8th of June, we would have items in a bag and students and parents can drive by and pick them up. But we're working out the details here, because that week of June 1st is a busy week for us. June 2nd is the primary. Our buildings are full. June 3rd and 4th, we're going to have a drive-through procession for graduation over the course of those 2 days so that students can walk across a stage to receive their diploma cover. And then, of course, June 5th would be the virtual ceremony in the evening. So it's a very busy week with things happening on campus. I want to be really careful about the ways that we're interacting and make sure that we uphold the guidelines of the health department. So we're working on a detailed schedule for you, and we hope to communicate that out this week. We're thinking about the days where you as staff can get in there to do what you need to do in your classrooms and to get the items that you yourself would like to get before you head home for the summer, to really be home for the summer. So stay tuned on that. So I mentioned a little bit about graduation. We will have our students process in a car, in a line, and we're going to organize them by elementary school they attended, so that on June 3rd, students that want to skip back can sign up for a slot, a time slot, to drive down Campus Drive to the high school bus circle. Around the bus circle, they'll get out of their car, the senior, walk across the stage, pick up a diploma cover, participate in a photo op, back in the car, and the line continues. And there'll be some other opportunities for photo ops on the campus of the high school as they're departing Campus Drive and the high school. it was really important to parents of our seniors that our students have a chance to walk across the stage. So this is the plan that's been developed. The stage will be set up to look much like it does in the stadium. We won't be in the stadium. We'll be under the overhang outside the cafeteria of the high school bus circle. So students and families will be protected from inclement weather. We'll have a stage set up, we'll have it decorated. Hopefully it'll feel like what our students are used to when they see it. I know that they're excited about walking across the stage in their cap and gown, and we're attempting to accommodate that. There will also be a virtual viewing on June 5th, and that virtual recording of graduation will be more formal in terms of what's presented, senior portraits with some information about each senior. There will also be the typical speeches, although we've all been instructed to talk a little bit less so that we keep those speeches brief. So I'm certainly going to do that. Dr. Moss, Mrs. Lofton, we're trying to keep things brief. However, you'll have that pomp and circumstance that's typically a part of the graduation ceremony, some of the music that we're used to. We're hoping to incorporate those conversations on the part of our students, Leanna Strohecker and Evan Reiser, and then the three of us. So it will move through some of those same steps of the traditional ceremony, but it'll be virtual. And that will be shown at 6:30, June 5th, Friday night. And then with some of the footage from students walking across the stage and some candid footage, there will be another viewing. We hope at some point we're able to bring seniors together to celebrate with a senior picnic. They can sign each other's yearbooks. I'm not holding out a lot of hope for that this summer. As you may be aware, we had a tentative graduation date set for later in August, and I'm not sure it's worth setting aside that date based upon the trends in the pandemic and the data that we're viewing. So we're trying to make the most of the June ceremony and some special things that will enhance it with some special showcasing and recognitions leading up to graduation, and then some nice follow-up. I don't know that we'll ever come together in person though for graduation this year. For summer school, a lot of things this summer will be virtual. We've made a decision as an administrative team that extended school year will be virtual only, and LIFT will also be virtual. That's what we're proposing this evening at our board meeting. Most Montgomery County schools are doing the same thing. They're shifting to virtual because there's just too much uncertainty in whether or not you can get into the physical space. So we're planning for virtual. We'll also offer some community ed experiences virtually. We will not be bringing students on site this year to be a part of large groups at this point. So something else I wanted to talk about, I see there is one chat. I'm going to take a look. Okay. Thank you, Melissa. Tech school students did pick up their items today. Good to know. Thank you for that. Let's talk about, so let me bring closure to that. We are going to be publishing a schedule about what the end of the year might look like. And again, my goal is to get that out to you this week by the end of the week. So the tech school, it was just noted, allowed their students to come in today and pick up some items. And I know that Dr. Moss has a schedule she's developed for seniors. We're working on the underclassmen too. So stay tuned for that. It will include you and when you can access your building and support that effort. So we'll get that out to you. So we talked about the end of this school year. We talked about summer. Let's talk about next school year. And really, any of the decisions that are made about how we might initiate the 2021 school year will be data-driven and uphold the guidelines that have been put forth by the county and state health departments. And I've been tracking that data pretty carefully, monitoring the trends and looking at the number of positive new cases and those cases that maybe are emerging from assisted living facilities or the prison in Montgomery County, in our case, versus those that were otherwise healthy individuals. Many are elderly, if you look at the data. And the data do seem to be trending downward. Based on Governor Wolf's formula, we need to get to that number of 30 new cases a day on average over a 14-day period. So we have a ways to go before we reach that. I did see the number of new cases reported as of May 9th was 73. So we're moving in the right direction. We'll see how today looks later on. So whatever we do as a school district will be guided by the county and the state. And what I've done here is broken the ideas down into some of the what ifs. We could be on site. We could start the 2021 school year just as we would start any school year. And the question is, what is our preparation if? Well, if it's business as usual, we know what to do. We've done that before. If we have split sessions, that's an idea. Maybe you're hearing some of these ideas. Bring some students in for a morning session, some students in for an afternoon session, bring students in every other day so that on the alternating days we can do some heavy cleaning. There's also been an idea that we spread elementary students out throughout the entire district, use all 7 buildings for elementary students, and conduct education for our secondary level students virtually. So we continue it in that way for them. There's another idea that maybe we bring in small groups of students that require the most academic attention. They're needy students, maybe their gaps have widened as a result of this experience. Maybe they're ones we're recognizing would really benefit from small group instruction. Maybe we start on site in the physical setting second semester. So lots of different possibilities that we're talking about each week. I meet twice with the IU and the superintendents from Montgomery County with lots of conversation about how they're thinking and what they're planning for the fall. And there are strong efforts for people to try and remain consistent, for schools to be consistent to the degree that it makes sense. It's possible we could start the 2021 school year virtually. So what's our preparation if we start the school year virtually? That's a question that I think as time goes on a little bit more, we may have some more direction around. I'm not ready to conclude either on-site or virtual or even recommend one or the other at this point. I think there are too many data that we need to watch, and we need to see how, while the stay-at-home order has been extended until June 4th, some of the business restrictions have been relaxed. It'll be interesting to see, it'll be interesting to monitor the data and the cases over the course of this month. At any rate, if we start up the year on another virtual voyage, if you will, what do we need to think about? And how much of it will be asynchronous versus synchronous for our students? Will there be adjustments we want to make because we've realized they work better for students? Or maybe some things that don't work so well that we also want to fix or eliminate. Okay, a couple things are coming through in the chat. So, would it be feasible if we start virtually to have modules set up per subject level? For instance, anyone enrolled in biology engages with a common module. Anyone enrolled in 11th grade English engages in a common module. Yes, that's absolutely possible and could be very efficient and helpful in organizing the experiences for our students. I know that our high school and our middle schools also, but our high school is really concerned about developing a schedule for on-site and a schedule for virtual classes. So some complications there, but yes, absolutely. I'm gonna save this chat so that I can refer back to it. So your feedback's really, it's welcome and it's very helpful. So I'm hoping that we're able to make a decision about how we start up the 2021 school year by June 30th. I don't know for certain that'll happen, but that's my target. I know that colleges, many of them, are aiming for June 15th. I'm asking for a little more time because I'd really like to watch things carefully. And I have to admit, a game changer for me recently is what's happening with some of the children in New York and the Kawasaki disease symptoms or disease-like symptoms they're developing, when before the virus really, it did not affect children in the way it affected the elderly or those with pre-existing conditions. So that's a real game changer for us. If this virus is going to start to dramatically and significantly impact young people, children, that's a whole nother layer for us to consider. So lots of questions, and I want to, again, monitor that very carefully before making a recommendation about how we might start the 2021 school year. So going back to the virtual piece, there's a good question here in the chat. Going back to LIFT and ESY being virtual this summer, what if parents are asking for private tutoring? Do you recommend that we conduct tutoring virtually as well? Or is it up to our discretion depending on decisions that have yet to be made? You know, I'm becoming more and more comfortable with teachers and or paras working with students in small groups via video. There are methodologies and security measures that we can put in place. And I've come to know it can be an extremely effective mode for delivering instruction. So I think we can talk about that. I think there's real possibility there that teachers will work with small groups of students virtually, and even one-on-one. I want you to be comfortable. So we can talk more about that in those individual situations. But I know that some of our students will really benefit from the small groups structure or the one-on-one. And in some cases, that's already happening with some of our paraprofessional support staff as well as teachers. So we'll talk more about that. And yes, question about spreading elementary out. If we're back on site and maybe we spread our elementary out over lots of different schools to space them out and create more distance. Yes, so a layer to that is the staffing that's necessary to support students in that sort of arrangement. So we have to think about that too. It's a very good point, and it's been brought up before. I don't have an answer to it yet, but it definitely is something we have to think about. So we don't want to stop moving forward, and we're thinking about those students we want to welcome in the 2021 school year, and are considering now some sort of virtual orientation with the possibility of on-site as time goes on. And the groups that we're really keyed in on are kindergarten and our 5th graders preparing to go into 6th grade at the middle level, and our 8th graders preparing to transition to the high school. So our teachers and our principals are working together. Some of you I know as part of the core teams, if you will, and helping principals to know what might work, what might serve our kindergartners or our 6th graders, rising 6th graders well. Link Crew is already doing some work to support our rising 9th graders. So we're thinking about orientation for our students in the new year as we roll them over and we advance them. And that's really important. So question has come up about coaches. And as you know, PIAA eventually canceled the season this spring. And under Act 13, there were some guarantees in that legislation about all educators, all individuals employed with the school district, earning no more or no less than they would have otherwise earned had the pandemic not occurred. So a couple of double negatives in there, but you get the idea. Now, Act 13 legislation expires June 30th, so I'm not sure what's going to happen in the fall. I have not heard much from PIAA about what they're thinking at this point, and I'm wondering if it's a bit early for them too. Not sure what will happen with coaches. So please stay tuned for that. That's a good question to put on my radar as we start to think about August and getting ready for those fall activities that are a part of the start of the new school year. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And Mr. Golansky may have more information. I'll look into that and get back to you. So that's 2 things I want to follow up on in particular. One would be the schedule for the end of the year. How are we going to close out the year? What's that going to look like? And then also PIAA and fall seasons. I can't seem to open the Q&A when there are questions in the Q&A. So Laurie Widener, if you could share those with me, I'll address them now if they're practical to the conversation. Okay, so if it's all right, I'll move on to the budget. I'll talk about capital projects, and then I'll come back to some of those questions so I can open up a Google Doc and look at the questions if that's all right with everybody. Okay, let's talk about the budget. So A school district budget is based on revenues and expenditures, sort of the basic terminology. How much money do we bring in? How much do we want to spend? And the revenues come from three major sources: local sources, people paying real estate taxes, for example; state sources, we get about 20% of our revenues from the state, 19%; and then federal. And federal is really the smallest amount in terms of the revenues the district receives. It's less than 1%, but let's call it 1%. So local revenues comprise 80% of the revenues we realize in our budget and really keep us operating. And there are projections out there, and if you're reading about this, the economists are projecting that revenues are going to decline. So, for example, will people pay their real estate taxes next year? Will they have the money to do that? We've realized most of our real estate tax money this year will be fine to finish out this year. But as we budget for next year and our board prepares to approve a proposed final budget or a final budget in June, they're questioning what will come in next year in terms of revenues based on the economic conditions right now and the number of people out of work, the number or the percentage of people that have signed up for unemployment, for example. These are serious questions. And while the percentage decrease in revenues doesn't sound high, 3.2% total, it's several $1 million. So right now, we're technically looking at about a $6 million shortfall. Now, there are ways that we can whittle away at that. Number one, we've proposed some expenditure reductions to our board where, for example, we take some true-up costs that are typically realized each year that represent the differences when staff resign or retire and new staff are hired. That's a significant amount of money. We are cutting budgets, building budgets, department budgets. We're looking at technology decreases, copier cost decreases. So there's a list, and it's public. You can look at it if you want. At any rate, we're close to about $3 million actually in cutting costs, over $2 million. And in addition to that, there will hopefully be a real estate tax increase at some level supported by our board. You know, I don't know that they'll go to the Act 1 index, which is 2.6%. However, they've looked at 1.5, 2, and 2.5. And our state was actually talking about passing legislation that would prohibit school districts from raising taxes at all, keep them at a 0%. However, that does not seem to be gaining much momentum. And I'm not certain that legislation is going to pass. I know that our board is still being very thoughtful about the percentage rate hike they might approve for our community, being cognizant of the struggles of many in our community. So in addition to some expenditure reductions recommended by administration, in addition to a potential tax increase, if they increase taxes 1.5%, that's $1 million. There are savings from COVID-19 that can also be used to offset. And we have found a path to eliminating that shortfall without asking teachers to take a 0% salary increase. We're pushing on that. Mr. McGill and I have had conversations about that. And without, I'm hoping, furloughing anyone. So again, and I've mentioned that in public, while it was absolutely a consideration early on, it's not something I'm recommending, and it's not something that I believe anyone is interested in doing, and we're trying really hard to avoid that. So I think we found a path to getting to a balanced budget. And you'll hear more about that tonight if you're interested. We'll talk more about that. So I wanted to give you an up-to-date view of that. We may end up attritioning some positions, which you're probably familiar with that term by now. Sometimes when teachers or administrators retire or resign, we don't replace them. And those savings are realized as part of our general fund. So the salary and benefits we would have otherwise spent are now savings. So that helps reduce the expenditures, and that helps offset that shortfall. That's a simple example. I think 70% of our budget is due to salary and benefits. So it's really a significant piece. So it's really staffing that impacts the most. So when we attrition positions, it can be some significant savings relative to some other things that are considered. Okay, so I see some things that have come through in the chat. I'm going to see if they are about the budget. Yeah, so I want to come back to this question about the fall and coming back on campus. So I want to come back to teachers and staff who may be immunocompromised. I think that's a really important question, and I want to talk about that. I know the plan is to decrease the number. So here's a question about decreasing the number of teachers at the elementary level. Is this a definite, or can the decision be reconsidered? This seems to be the year to have small class sizes in both scenarios, virtual and social distance in the buildings. Plus, we don't know how many students will no longer be able to afford private school tuition due to parents losing jobs and will transfer into our schools. That's an excellent point, and I appreciate you calling that out, making it, because we have wondered some similar things. And again, I'm sort of working with our board to try and avoid attritioning all positions that represent retirements or resignations for the reasons that have been described in the chat. And I think everybody can see the chat, maybe not. But maybe it's only the panelists, I'm sorry. But anyway, the question about trying to maintain those smaller and more reasonable class sizes, which our board has always been really dedicated to, has real merit this year going into the fall, where we're worried kids have lost ground and we want to catch them up, where we're worried about being too congregated and being able to keep some distance. So really important point. A question about cutting contract counselors for emotional support. That is certainly something we're talking about right now. We're in conversations about that, and we're trying to work through some things there. So I see that you can't see the chat. So I'm reading the chat feed. It's really only for the panelists, and Laurie Widener will be putting the questions together for us. Happy to address anything. Okay, what about support staff? If we don't start until second semester, support staff already feels like they might not have stayed employed if the state didn't step in. Support staff is working so hard right now and is learning so much to be able to support students virtually. I think that's an important question. And I recognize what many of our support staff are doing to actually support this voyage, to stick with the metaphor, continuing. And I know that many of our paraprofessionals are working in small settings with students. They're helping teachers where students would benefit from either a one-on-one or a smaller group instruction. So I'm hoping we all remain employed, because I'm hoping that eventually at some point next year, if it's not at the beginning of the year, we're back on site and getting back to as close as possible business as usual. So it's an important question. Hasn't been discussed at all at any other level. So I think I covered what I wanted to cover with the budget. Let me move on to capital projects. This is a big one too, because if you were following the capital projects, we had some sophisticated assessments, thorough assessments conducted during the 18-19 school year with regard to our facilities and our athletic fields. And we learned that our athletic fields are in pretty poor condition. And if you're a coach, if you're out and about on our fields, you're aware that they would benefit from some improvements. And the other aspect of it is, beyond the safety and the necessary improvements, our track is really beat up and in need of a resurfacing. And in the league, in our county and in our league, the PAC, most schools, the majority of schools, have turf surfaces. So their students are used to playing field hockey in particular. That's the one that stands out the most, on turf. So the idea was that we've been saving some monies in our capital projects accounts. They're dedicated fund balance accounts. It's called Capital Projects Fund Balance. So it's dedicated savings for the purpose of projects like improving buildings, some of the changes happening at South, some of the changes that happen district-wide each summer, and improving our athletic fields. So the big question, since we've been moving the project forward to get 2 turf fields, is will we continue to move turf fields forward? And that's absolutely a question that we continue to tease out, if you will, and break down during board meetings and public meetings. If we can get to a balanced budget without impacting staff negatively, I am recommending to our board that we consider installing the turf fields and upgrading with those improvements that will provide the safety we're looking for our students, as well as the equity of play in the league, in the county. Now, I'm not asking them to put in turf fields or complete any kind of capital project that would otherwise impose upon the educational experiences of our kids, of our students. That's not how this works. But I have expressed in public, if we can get to a balanced budget that's reasonable, it would be supportive of our students' experiences to continue with these athletic field improvements, even 1 field, if not 2. The RFPs that were returned came back at a very low price. I'm guessing this construction firm is looking for the business too. People want to be working that aren't working. So a couple of variables at play. However, if we can't balance the budget in a way that works for our students academically, if you will, we most likely won't be moving forward with the turf fields. But if we can, then I'm recommending and in support of moving these projects, at least 1 of them, forward. So stay tuned for more of that. We still don't have permit approvals. They're due in this month. I feel like I've been saying that a lot, but they're coming. There were some hiccups, and then the Conservation District, which is really the overarching permit awarding organization, if you will, they were shut down during COVID. So there were some hiccups in the process. Once they approve, the township has indicated they'll follow. We're hoping for those permits this month. And if our board feels comfortable, and if the budget is healthy enough, then they may move forward with at least 1 of these fields, these improvements. So that's where we are with the plan. There's money in this capital projects account that I mentioned. It's called a capital projects fund balance. The board has also considered taking out a bond. You know, you'll hear some financial advisors describe money right now as being really cheap or inexpensive to borrow, while it's important to hold on to our cash. We don't know what next year will bring. The projections look pretty grim, but they're not definite yet. So we're trying to be very conservative and thoughtful about the expenditures this year and how much cash we leave in our fund balance to be sure we can get through next year and then the year after that. If we go back to 2008 and the recession that started that year and lasted for a couple of years, we had a couple tough years and then slowly started to climb in terms of the revenues we were realizing again and bringing things back to the way that we appreciate having them to offer the service that we like to offer. The bond issue, so this is a good question. If the board would take out a bond, and they're talking about a $5 million bond, back before COVID, they were talking about a $9 million bond. The bond is broken out over the years so that it makes every effort, the way it's structured in terms of repayments, to maintain level funding so that it doesn't really offset the debt service or the mortgage payment, if you will, for the district. So right now, a $5 million bond would add about $170,000 to its debt service payment, which is pretty minimal. It pays about $10 million, $9 million each year in debt service. So they're trying to be, again, very thoughtful. It would extend over 13 years and the payments would be minimal. So there would not need to be a tax increase if a bond is taken. In fact, the administration has recommended to our board in the past to pay cash for 1 of the turf fields and then maybe use a bond if they get it, because there are other capital projects to pay for that second turf field. So the board has cash to pay for 1 of the fields. If it would choose to spend that cash, it has it. It has saved up. It's got over $5 million in a capital projects account. So there are some options there. So yes, the bond issue does add some debt, but the debt is maintained at level funding, it's called, so that there isn't this dramatic shift in the payments due by the district or on the taxpayer. And that's been the philosophy of the district for some time. So there's another good question, just going back to teaching and learning and students in our school settings, busing and lunchrooms. That's one of the other suggestions that's been made. Do we put students on buses in the fall if we're still worried about maintaining social distance? And do we have students eat in the cafeteria? There are some suggestions that maybe students would have to eat in their classrooms. And again, desks have to be 6 feet apart. So we'll see how that goes, but those are also very important points and things that we're thinking about as we consider what might make sense for next year. So that's all I have, and I don't know if maybe now I can go to the Google Doc and check out. Okay, I see some questions here. Okay, one question in the Q&A is, will the virtual summer programs be run by PV teachers? Yes, they will. They will be run by PV teachers. So the postings will go out to our teachers and support staff if we don't get enough teachers, but these will be run by PV, yes. And that would include ESY, and it would include LIFT. We also offer secondary level, we've been offering secondary level summer school, high school, I'm sorry, and that's offered online with an approved vendor that our board has approved and that we've used for years now. And another question, will the summer programs extended school year and LIFT be run and taught by PV teachers? That is the intent, yes, that the summer programs will be taught by PV teachers. I'm hoping we can get teachers that feel comfortable delivering instruction virtually and can support our students and hopefully some of the students that they know in catching up. Okay, another question. Would the on-site options for 2021 start of the year include a virtual option for families who are uncomfortable or have children with underlying conditions? So this takes us back to the immunocompromised situations. And I think this is something that I'm wondering about and thinking a lot about in terms of where you are as a team of teachers in coming back into the physical setting. And what I'd really like to do is have some more intimate conversations, maybe with buildings. But I know that this is something we have to think about. And I think we need to provide options for individuals who have pre-existing or underlying conditions that would put them at greater risk for contracting the virus. So that's something we're thinking about, absolutely. And yes, again, emphasis on please consider staff members who have compromised immune systems or family members with compromised immune systems. Absolutely, yes, we are absolutely thinking about that. So another question came in, has PIAA made a decision about fall sports? To my knowledge, they haven't, but that's something I want to follow up with you on. And I will ask Mr. Glancy. I don't believe so. Oh, and Dr. Moss piped in and she says they won't make a decision until the governor makes one. So no decision yet on the fall. Will there be retirement incentives? You know, I'm not sure. We did talk a little bit about a retirement incentive possibility. I'm not sure it would get the support based on as we review the cost benefit. I'm not sure we have the interest. We did talk about it, and you know, I don't know if principals could let me know how many people from their buildings might be interested in an incentive. I know our board is interested in supporting that if we have enough staff. So when a retirement incentive is offered, it often requires a certain number of teachers to commit to it for it to be cost effective for the district, because usually there's some sort of payout or bonus or something that costs some money to incentivize people to want to retire maybe early. So I'm absolutely interested if there are those of you out there who would be interested in having a conversation and learning more. We started it, but we were very brief, not certain that this was the year for that. Okay. So a couple of other questions. If you're going to consider separating desks, keep in mind science classrooms have lab tables. So how do we separate lab tables? Well, I don't think we can, but that's a great question. So we need a plan B for that. And I'm guessing we're going to need a lot of plan Bs actually as we approach some of the things we're facing. So I think we would have to rethink how we might schedule our science classes or the environment in which they'll occur. So that's a great question and something else to put on the radar. Okay, so would outside of building be able to be used for things such as band camp, sports practice without building access over the summer? We actually just started to talk a little bit about this today, thinking about fall sports. Again, as we get to the end of the year, we think about the beginning of the next year, and we're thinking about those August activities. So I don't have an answer for you there on whether or not we can run band camp in the way that we're used to as of August 1st or whatever that date is. We are thinking about it, but I think we need more data. I think we need to progress monitor the data this month and then again, prepare recommendations. We'll also follow the leadership of the county and the state, Dr. Valar Cush, Dr. Rachel Levine, and certainly Governor Wolf. Okay, so any thoughts on the setup of classes that are not typically taught at desks, physical education, music ensembles? I'm not sure what you mean by that question. Can you elaborate on that? I'll come back to it. How will CPI restraints be safely completed when necessary? Good question. And I think we need to talk about a protocol for that if we're back in the physical setting and there are precautions that we need to adhere to. So we'll talk more about that. That's a good question. I'll save the chat and come back to that as part of what we think about. Yeah, so another question about how do we separate 6 feet apart with students who need CPI intervention? I think that's a really good question. And those needs on the part of some of our special education students and staff are ones that are going to require some different thinking and some different protocols. So stay tuned for that. I'm glad you put them on the radar though. What are the emergency use clauses, if any, in regard to the use of capital funds in the event our regular budget cannot be balanced? So can we reallocate some of the $5 million to academic purposes given the emergency? So that's a great question. And yes, the board could actually shift monies from capital projects into the general fund. However, it's not recommended. They can do it. There's also an unassigned fund balance, which represents 8% of the budgeted expenditures. So right now they have about $9 million in their unassigned fund balance. It's like a savings account, but technically it's not a savings account. So they do have money that they can fall back on as we progress into next year. However, they're still being very thoughtful and we're still being conservative and still really monitoring the revenue projections. Will we have to wear masks and gloves if we end up coming back to work in the fall? Not certain about that. If we have to wear masks and gloves, I'm not certain we'll be coming back into the physical setting in the fall. There may be times when we need to. However, if the restrictions are as strict as they are now, it's going to be very difficult to actually run school in the physical setting in the ways that we know. If on site, will students and staff be screened before entering the building? We've talked about taking temperatures. Again, logistically, that can be very challenging. There are 1,800 students at the high school. We've looked at that. Some schools are considering that. Schools that we believe are smaller in terms of their student population. Again, I question if we should be back in the buildings if we need to take the temperature of our students or our staff. So more to come on that. It's a good question and something we've been tossing around too. Yeah, so the question is, again, to our high school with 1,800 students, how do you maintain social distancing 6 feet apart? And you really can't. Between classes, it would be very difficult if we maintained the population as we know it. So we're going to need to make adjustments if that social distancing is still in place. Wondering about the 6-foot separation for these classes, locker rooms, instrument rooms with large numbers of students. Yeah, I agree. So I think if we're in situations where we need to keep kids or students and staff 6 feet apart at a minimum, then we're going to need to rethink the structure of some of our classes. So the question is really around students in the locker room, students in instrumental music rooms where they tend to be in close quarters. Students stand on risers as they participate in choir. So we need to think about that if those restrictions are still in place, absolutely. If sports and music, marching band don't happen, we need to be aware of the emotional impact it can have on students. Many students rely on those activities to keep them connected and involved, especially those who struggle with education. I absolutely agree. And you know what, that's one of the things I've been talking to our principals a little bit more about lately, is that I'm hearing about students struggling more socially and emotionally at this point in this stay-at-home situation, in this virtual learning environment. And I'm guessing there are adults who are in the same category. So losing out on these activities that they really appreciate, that they really engage in, that keep them engaged in school, is going to be really tough for some of our students. And I've been describing it as an all hands on deck in the fall. If we're back in the physical setting, it will be an all hands on deck working with our students and supporting them, strengthening and building upon those already strong relationships we have with our kids. Our kids, believe it or not, really miss school. They miss all of you. They miss their teachers because you have those great relationships and they're not seeing you, they're not seeing their friends, and it's becoming much more difficult. So I appreciate the question about now losing activities on top of that for another season. We'll work on that. Will there be a scenario where staff can return to their buildings to prepare online learnings, but not students? Yeah, we're going to try and work out a schedule for the end of the year where, as staff, you can get back in the buildings. I hope to have that by the end of the week. And what thought has been given to the number of Chromebooks that will not be functioning? You know what? I haven't thought about that. I'm hoping that most of our Chromebooks continue to function. One thing I will share at this point around Chromebooks is we're not going to collect them, but we're going to leave them with the students to which they've been assigned and then ask our students to bring those back in the fall. And that will be their device for the school year, with the exception of the elementary level. You know, we'll make the appropriate arrangements there. Can the school district modify learning, closing buildings, if the governor reopens? Yeah, there is some amount of local control. And as long as we don't violate something that has been mandated by the state. So in other words, we may be able to be stricter, but maybe not more lax. And we would have to look at, I'd really have to look at the specific verbiage the governor would use or the guideline that might be published before we as a district might do something different from what the governor recommends. That's really the question. You know, what if we want to do something different from what Governor Wolf recommends? How will we respond? We have some latitude there. We have some local control. In this situation, there have been a lot of changes to that because there have been mandates from the state. However, we'll watch that closely too. And again, follow the lead as it's necessary for us to do. But when we have flexibility and latitude, we'll certainly consider it. Wondering how many parents are going to choose to keep their students home from school if we are back in the buildings. How will we teach those both in and out? Yeah, that's a question administration is wondering about too. How will parents, how will they feel? Will they be comfortable sending their children back to the physical buildings, even if the data indicate it's safe? Will they still be uncomfortable? We're wondering, will we have a mass exodus of students? Will they go to cyber schools, cyber charter schools? Will we have a mass influx of students because maybe private school is too expensive right now? So those are good questions. And then that logistics of teaching some kids in at home while others are in the physical setting is a really good one. And we need to tease that out. And as time goes on, I think we'll have a better sense of the likelihood of either getting a lot more students in or a lot of students leaving, or even the feeling on the part of parents about sending their children to school. That's a good question. Are we moving forward with Synergy for next year? Right now, that is the plan. Yes, we're moving forward with Synergy. but I'm interested in feedback from those that are on the core team as we continue to learn more about the system, and hope to have it implemented this summer, actually. Will classroom cleanup, pack up look the same this year as always, or will it be more minimalistic? In terms of cleaning purposes, we want to be pretty close to what we've always done so that we clear out the rooms almost completely and allow our custodial staff to clean and really thoroughly clean before kids would come back, if that's the direction we go, that we bring students back into the physical setting. But we'll give you some details on that as time goes on. If we're still in the virtual in the fall, what can we expect as far as PSSA testing in the spring? That's a great question. Boy, who was relieved that we didn't have to administer PSSAs and keystones? I'm wondering if I see 429 hands in the air. Yeah, that would be nice. That would be a nice relief and a cost savings for our state. That's an expensive endeavor that they take on. I'm not sure what the chances are. You know, it's federal legislation that drives PSSA and keystone testing. This year, there was a federal waiver that the state signed on for so that we were relieved of that requirement as part of ESSA. Otherwise, it's really federal that's driving that train. So I'm not sure where that'll land next year. How will we handle attendance given some parents may choose to keep students home without a vaccine or some other treatment? Yeah, I think we have to talk about attendance. So while we figured out what to do with attendance this year, it was short term. If we're back longer term, I think we need to consider attendance differently, just like we might need to consider how we start up instruction and how we acclimate our students to the new learning of a new grade level in the new year if we're virtual. That's a good question. If we are in some days and not others, we need to consider the additional cost of extra daycare to our families, especially at elementary level. This may be an additional hardship for families. Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't have a good answer for that, but you're right. If parents only have their children in our schools every other day, what do they do those alternating days? Can they accommodate taking care of them, or must they pay for some additional daycare? That's a good question. I don't know. Any word on students who didn't take keystones this year having to take them next year after being away? I don't know for certain. I thought they were going to waive it for those students, but I don't know that for certain. So if your students didn't take the keystone, remember it's not a graduation requirement by the state now. Proficiency anyway isn't on the keystone exam itself. I don't think you have to retake it, but I'm not 100% certain. It is likely that there will be increased emotional needs for all students in the fall, and there is consideration of cutting the creative health social worker positions that currently provide therapeutic support to our emotional support. What's the plan for addressing the emotional needs of all students if mental health support professionals are being spread more thin than ever due to these cuts? So we have some contracted services that for several years have been supporting some of our emotional support students through Creative Health. And we're right now in conversations about how we will support our emotional support students in the fall. So stay tuned on that one. We're working on that. It's definitely blinking bright on the radar screen, if you will. And I see that there are a couple of hands raised. So Mr. Ganesh, please feel free to unmute for people that have raised their hands. And I'm happy to address questions.
Okay, so I just made Testa the speaker. He can now speak, he or she. No response. I'll go to the next one.
Okay, wait, maybe I'm hearing her in the background. I'm not sure. I think I'm hearing Jessica. Do I need to unmute?
No, you don't have to.
Okay. Wait, I see. I think it's, wait, here it is. Is it Carly Testa? Chuck Testa.
All right, so I'll move on to the next person in line.
Okay.
It's Carla. I'm going to unmute her.
Hi, Carla. She's still muted. I can't unmute her. I'm trying. It's Carla Zielinski. I see her now. Her full name is here.
Right.
Okay, well, let me try again. No, it's not letting me unmute. I guess you have to do that, Karthik.
She's unmuted now.
Okay. Hi, Carla.
Sorry, Barb, I didn't mean to raise my hand. My apologies.
Oh, so all that. No worries, really. It's fine. Thanks. Anyone else have a verbal comment?
Yeah, Kim.
Kim, hi. Hi, Kim.
Dr. Russell. Is there a stop date planned for the ending new learning for this year? I know other surrounding districts have ended, they've got dates like about a week or so prior to when students are out.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that. We didn't necessarily talk about an end date to new learning as much as we talked about how we'll organize to get things cleaned up and students their materials, teachers their materials before the end of the year, that last day of school. And what I would recommend is that you do what you've typically done in the past, without calling it out specifically, that we're going to stop new learning on June 4th because it's the first half day. Use your judgment in what you're doing with your students. I would encourage you to end the year on a positive and more fun, if you will, opportunities to engage and leave on a positive note for the summer would be great. And in the meantime, leading up to June 4th, that first half day, we'll talk about a schedule to get people into the building and get students their items. However, I am not necessarily inclined to call out a hard and fast date. New learning is going to stop here. Use your judgment.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
All right, next person, Lee.
Lee Militello?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't have a question. I was just talking to you before about people spinning and couldn't get in.
Gotcha. Yeah, thanks, Lee.
Yes,
Appreciate
you're
your help. Anybody else with their hand up?
That's it, Dr. Russell.
Okay, so I have a few more questions that I see here. What about fire drills and lockdowns? It's a good question. There'll be a lot of protocols that if we're back in the physical setting, we're going to need to think about and think differently around. And that's the task of administration over the summer anyway, or towards the end of this year, once we get through graduation, honestly, to really think about and consider how we might do some of the things we're used to doing a certain way differently in this new environment. So good question to call out and ask about fire drills and lockdowns because we tend to be very close together. And will all students have to get a vaccine if one is available? Interesting. If my friend Meg Lewis is on, I'd love to hear her prediction on that. But right now, it's required that our students be vaccinated before they start school. However, there is an out for those that have strong views against vaccines. So I see Meg is here now. So maybe Meg can speak to that for us if she's comfortable. Hi, Meg.
Hi, Barb. Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's safe and healthy. So we have been talking to the county and the Immunization Coalition moving forward with what is going to be required for September. As you may know, Pennsylvania changed the immunization law a few years ago, and we became much more strict in about allowing students to enter school. So where in the past they had an 8-month provisional attendance, it's now a certain immunizations have to be had on the first day of school, or 5 days of school, or 30 days of school if they're new entrants. So I do feel that with the immunizations in place, they're going to continue to be just as strict. And I do feel that we will be requiring this vaccination as other vaccinations. There is an out clause, though, that you need to be aware of, that parents do have the right to not vaccinate their child based on a philosophical or a religious belief. We do have students in our buildings that parents have opted for that. They are the minority, and the parents believe in that herd immunity. I don't think that's going to be as prevalent, because we're not going to have that herd immunity without with all the social distancing, with the sheltering in place, and without that immunization. It's going to take a few years to have that herd immunity. So, you know, we're watching closely the regulations, what that'll be, but I do think that that's going to be a requirement for schools moving forward. And if I can just say too, Barb, if you don't mind.
Don't mind at all.
You know, everyone's worried about next year, and I hear a lot of these questions. And please know that your nurses, your certified school nurses are meeting with the county nurses, with Michelle McMasters, with the state nurses. And, you know, we already have some guidelines about how we will move forward and how will health offices look, and how our guidelines for sending students home if they're ill and keeping them out. You know, now we have a 24-hour you know, fever-free type of thing. That will probably be extended to 72 hours. And if they've been exposed, maybe to 7 to 10 days. So we are looking at that as well. We don't have all the answers right now, but we certainly have a lot of questions. And as we move forward in this process, we'll certainly be able to, you know, answer more of those questions for you, so you can feel safe if the kids do come back to school. Thank you.
Thank you, Meg. That's very helpful. So I'm seeing some additional questions here. And if it's all right, I'll take a few more minutes and go over these. So some questions about getting our kindergarten students acclimated, and will they be given a Chromebook? Who will get them set up? We're working on that as part of the conversations we're having about kindergarten orientation. So stay tuned with that. We're not sure exactly, again, depending upon whether or not we remain virtual or in the physical setting, but we are thinking about how we acclimate and introduce our youngest learners to our schools. And second to that is getting our sixth graders, rising sixth graders, to middle school, and ninth graders into high school in ways that are comfortable. If we continue our virtual voyage, is the district looking at any online teaching platforms other than Google Classroom? We have looked at Schoology. I don't know if you're familiar with Schoology, but it is something we've looked at in the past. It's like a Facebook platform that connects coursework for students. One of the pieces of feedback that I've heard is that students get lots of emails on a daily basis. Principals get lots of emails because they have different Google Classrooms they're connected to. And Schoology is organized in a way that can eliminate some of what feels overwhelming with the messaging. So we're looking at that. We have to look at the cost, and I'm also concerned about something new for teachers. And if it's too challenging along with Synergy and just getting the year off the ground, then I'm hesitant to commit. However, we may have some people that want to try it, model it for us. We hear very good things about Schoology, and maybe some of you have children in other districts that are using Schoology. It would be great if you could speak up and give us your thoughts at some point. Question about Y Care this summer. We talked about that this morning as a cabinet team. Mr. Weaver's being questioned by Y Care facilities. We are contemplating Y Care in our buildings this summer and next year, but we have to sort through what's appropriate, what the guidelines will be, and what we're permitted to offer. So stay tuned for that. And yes, so another good question. If we break up the school day or we alternate students on different days, will the classrooms and buses be cleaned in between? Absolutely. And even toward the end of our school year as we know it, before the mandated school closures, buses were being cleaned every day at the end of the day. So that would continue, absolutely. And that would be part of the purpose, really, for having students attend on alternate days so that we could clean on those in-between days. So that's a really good question. Now I'm told I need to go back to the beginning. So I'm going to go to, there's some more in the chat. So this is an important question also. Recording sessions with students. If you're conducting or participating in a video conference with students, The question is, can I record this session? And the scenario, as I understand it, is if I'm teaching a chemistry lesson on thermodynamics, and I invite all of my students to attend, they're supposed to be in this class. It's going to be really important information. I'm going to help them understand some of the problems they're going to have to solve. But if some students can't make it, can I record the session and make it available to them later? My response is yes, but you need to get their permission, or you need to let parents know you're doing this so they can opt out. And yes, we've heard yes, and we've heard no. Attorneys weren't sure where to be at the beginning of all of this because there was so much new and questions about the what ifs. However, my response has been, let parents know, and parents can opt out if they are uncomfortable with their child being a part of a recording. And you're not recording the students, really. You're recording you and your voice. If you have more questions about that, reach out to me, and I'm happy to talk to you about that via email. Dr. Powers would like to be, okay, oh, she's good. So she raised her hand, but it was in response to a question earlier. Okay, are you considering the scheduling conflicts of trimester, vector, every other day schedules that occur in middle schools if we're starting the fall in a virtual? No, but it's a really good thought to put in our heads. So right now, it's a really good thought. I'm thinking about, are we going to be on site? Are we going to be virtual? But as you narrow it to the virtual, we're now thinking about timeframes for different learning experiences. We have trimesters at the elementary level. We have vectors or quarters at the secondary level. So we would need to sort through the logistics of that based upon the particular courses and the way we would be operating. So really good question, good point. What if we poll the staff to see who would be inclined to continue teaching from home and who would go into buildings, then having options for families in the fall if times are uncertain? Yeah, that's a great idea. We may take you up on that. The end date for new learning is important for ending units of study. Thanks for considering. Would you recommend the last full day as the last day of real learning? Yes, I would say that typically the last full day of school before the half days begins is when we typically conclude any new learning. Those half days, in my experience, have been celebratory in nature, and I encourage you to celebrate with your students, to end on a positive note. I was invited to a 5th grade birthday party on a video conference. I just thought it was the coolest thing, and it was great to see the kids. So yes, to that question. Tricky to make a vaccine mandatory without appropriate data, years of collection. Absolutely. So this individual is commenting on the fact that this vaccine is being developed. It's in development right now very quickly and much quicker than most vaccines. So that's an important point. People may be hesitant to take it because it's new and it won't have the years of data and testing that most vaccines have. Meg will help us know what to do when we get to that. During kindergarten screening, I've also had most parents asking about dental forms for new students and wondering if there would be an extension since all dentists are closed. Actually, that's a good question. That's been posed to me before about physicals. Meg, do you know if, I don't think they're giving an extension. I think I've asked you this about physicals or dental exams. Is that correct, or is there new information on that?
So the dental and the physical exams are not required that at the beginning of the school year. We actually submitted to the state to get approval that they're accepted from the year prior. So coming into kindergarten, we can actually accept a physical or a dental from July 1st of 2000. Our school dentist comes in February, and our school physician comes in May, and we can get them that way. With most physicians' office doing telemedicine and having patient portals, we can just accept those as well if parents can pull them off. But we're certainly going to work with parents regarding the physicals and dentals. It's those immunizations that are very strictly regulated from the state that we actually do a report in December with our counts of who is immunized with what vaccinations actually laid out per vaccination. But the physicals and the dentals we will be certainly flexible with.
Thanks, Meg. couple of other questions. Are there any professional development opportunities planned for the summer that address best practices for virtual learning and assessment practices? Absolutely. Our professional learning, our curriculum team is working on that actually. And I think there's been some really meaningful and purposeful professional learning that's occurred connected to virtual learning. So more of that to come, but absolutely. I know the assessment piece has been challenging. So I'm guessing it'll be helpful to lots of us to learn more about what's appropriate, what's best practice. And now that we're establishing our own virtual learning, yeah, we're getting good at this, right? Will this be an option on future snow days so that we won't have to make them up? We're thinking about it. I mean, we could apply. There's an application to the state. You have to think carefully about how you provide FAPE to our special education students. However, we've learned an awful lot in these weeks where we've been virtual. So that's a real possibility moving forward. We submit an application to the state. If we get approved for our virtual learning approaches, then we can be relieved of having to make up snow days. Time for writing report cards at the elementary level with changes. We're going to work with our elementary staff on that. So stay tuned for that end of year schedule. I was talking with principals about that Friday, and we're going to work with you because elementary are being asked to think a little bit differently about the report card and the way they report progress to parents. And hey, we've got friendly tech integrators that can help you make any sort of notification adjustments to your Google Classrooms. Don't hesitate to reach out to Tara or Christy. Okay, so my children's former school district uses Schoology, and it had a hard time syncing with eSchool for grading, made it hard for a parent to see their child's true grade, excuse me. Not sure how it will sync with Synergy. So we'll learn that. We have been asking those questions as we explore and investigate it as a possibility. Somebody else, my son is using Schoology in Souderton. I do not care for it as a parent. Google Classroom seems much more user-friendly and an easier, cleaner view. Well, that's really good to hear and extremely helpful. So thank you for sharing that. If we're still teaching new learning up until the half days, how do we attend graduation? Yeah, good question. And you're thinking, no surprise. One of my friends from Skipback. I would like, I don't know if I mentioned this, so I apologize if I did. I would like teachers of Skipback to be a presence during that drive-through procession on the morning of the 3rd. So yes, it makes it difficult for you then to be responsible for teaching. And in the afternoon on the 3rd, Schwenksville students will be driving through. It would be great if we could have Schwenksville staff, again, socially distanced, wearing the appropriate PPE to welcome your students, your former students, and just extend some well wishes. So yes, we would probably all just sort of move into a graduation support mode on the 3rd so that it's fair to everybody. But you're right, it's difficult for, in particular, Schwenksville and Skipback, if they're going to be there at the high school for a portion of the day, to also be teaching. So absolutely, we would relieve you of that. I would really like as many staff as possible to be there, and I want you to be comfortable with that, and again, with the appropriate distance. But I know that the students, the seniors would love it. They would be very supportive. So more talk about vaccines. They all go through several phases, and we make sure that they're safe. So this individual's husband is very closely connected to some of the software for these trials and has some knowledge about the vaccine. That's good to hear. A survey went out to parents on how virtual learning is going. Will one be going out to staff? Yes, so I am planning a survey for our staff, and I'm also planning to schedule some conversations with students and anecdotally hear from them via video conference how this experience has been for them. So stay tuned. I'll give you feedback on those too. Oh boy, another person who said they didn't really like Schoology when they were in Souderton. Wow, that's helpful feedback. Here I am thinking it was really good. Middle schools have not been told about this graduation drive-by. So yes, we want to inform you about the plans for graduation. So I apologize that some of us aren't fully aware. We're going to divide up again, the elementary schools, as I mentioned, so the 3rd, which is Wednesday, morning is skip back, afternoon is Schwenksville students. They'll drive in a car with their parents up to the stage in front of the cafeteria, walk across the stage, and then we're going to assign or invite middle school teachers connected to those respective elementary schools to be there too. And I know the students would love to see you. So we'll get that information out too. So that's something else that we'll try and get out to you this week, along with our end of year procedures and that schedule. Great. I'm thrilled that you want to be there. So somebody responded they would really like to be there, and I know the kids will really love it. Somebody's offering, they're doing some help with some of the senior walk videos that our elementary and middle schools are creating. Instead of our kids walking through the buildings that's become a bit of a tradition now for us, our seniors walk through their old elementary school. I think this year we were thinking about including middle schools. We're making videos this year to try and have them visualize what that's like, or make some of those same connections to that experience. Okay, so somebody else says, my kindergarten son is using Schoology. I've used it in grad class and I love it.
Okay. Schoology's not ours. Let's move
Yeah.
on.
Well, that was a positive one. Okay, so the question is, where will staff be during the graduation, in our vehicles or on the sidewalk? So the idea was that maybe you would be standing, presuming the weather's nice, at different spots along Campus Drive. So you would be out and about, again, socially distanced from others, but a presence. So we have not necessarily identified the exact locations, but are trying to appeal to our seniors as they drive by. So this individual really likes aspects of Schoology, gets a daily email every class, and if any work is missing, gets that message. Good to hear. Somebody else has experience with both, and Schoology can be much more difficult to navigate versus Google Classroom, which I think we're all getting used to. Okay, so somebody else is mentioning Schoology is not so good. Yeah, so like Meg said, I don't know that it's for us. Okay, so this feedback hasn't really been in support of it. Okay, and it takes a while to get used to some different things. Alrighty, and absolutely I respect anybody that is faced with a pre-existing condition or is immunocompromised and wishes to remain in their car as opposed to stand out and about and interact with people, absolutely, for that graduation procession. So I think that concludes everything that I had wanted to touch upon. I know we've sort of gone on for some time and I've done most of the talking, and that can get hard after a while to listen to. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll look over the questions. If I've missed anything, I'm happy to respond and answer those questions. And again, look for some end of year plans. We'll try and lay things out. We'll get them published and out to everybody by the end of the week. And we'll also talk about the details of graduation. Okay? Anything else for the good of the group through the chat? Questions? All right, everybody, please stay safe, stay healthy. And if we don't cross paths virtually, I hope the end of the year goes smoothly. But I really appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you. Don't hesitate to follow up. Thank you. Okay, so how'd it go? All good? I'm gonna leave the meeting and then I'll connect with you, Laurie, about some of the questions that maybe I missed and I'd still
Okay.
like to answer, okay?
Okay,
All
yeah.
right, thanks so much.
Yep.
See you guys. Karthik, thank you for the help. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Rose.